All right, champions. Well, thank you for joining us today. You are clearly the dedicated ones. So I'm going to ask you real quick, Sherbert, what would you like to get out of this session?
Well, I just signed a new lease. So this is so funny because I'm moving to a new salon suite place.
Okay.
And I signed the lease. They're supposed to open at the end of this month, but they ended up saying it's going to be the 15th of next month. And I'm like, it's when you want your rent. Move in now. So it's just amazing to be on this call to see, what I can learn. I've learned things before from you guys
Absolutely.
about leasing. And so one of your other trainers helped me to begin my lease where I am now currently and helped me to modify it and do some addendums and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'm excited about learning
All
today.
right. Well, that is fantastic. And Miss Jackie, what would you like to get out of this session today?
Oh, so much. Because I actually have never signed one myself. I inherited a couple and I've renewed one, but it was like with the second 5-year option. So that was already in place. So, but it's coming up in 2 more years. And
Aha.
then there's one that I want to get out of that I also inherited. So I'm like, what to do and what not to do.
Got it. So, how many of the rest of you want to know what Jackie knows? And how many of you inherited one and now your lease is going to be renewed and you're like, oh my gosh, what do I need to know? What do I need to do? Anyone else relate to that? Say, I do. Well, we are so excited to support you. And Salvatore, is there anything special you would like to get out of this today?
Well, I'm into my fifth year. I have a five and a five, and I'm into my first fifth year, the second year. And I just want to make sure that all my ducks are in order, prepare me. The more education I get, the better off I am.
Well, big amen to that. That is just so crucial. So I just want to take a moment and acknowledge each of you who have pushed the pause button of life, especially during such a busy time of the year, to work on your business versus in your business and to really get the education you need to propel you forward. So I just want to welcome all of you. For those of you who do not know me, I'm Lauren Gartland, founder and CEO of Inspiring Champions. And today we are gathering for one special purpose, and that is to educate and equip you with what you need to know and what you need to do before, everyone say before,
Before,
Before.
before signing a new lease or before renewing a current lease. So I am so excited and thrilled to share that in March, Inspiring Champions will be celebrating 30 years of transforming tens of thousands of lives and businesses across the salon industry. And it has been such a joy and an honor to walk alongside with so many amazing salon owners and team members. And helping you is what makes our day. Helping to make you breathe easier, helping you to have more success and to move through those challenges that all of us face as business owners, and most importantly, to help you achieve your dreams. That is who we are, and that is what we do. So today, champion, I'm privileged to be joined by my associate and right hand person, Miss Meadow Kenny, who I'll be introducing and following my presentation to start us with. But I want all of you, I'd like to begin by having you go to the chat box. And here's what I want to hear from you. Let us know, what is it that you are looking for when you sign, when you're no, not signing a lease, forget that. What is it that you are looking for and seeking when you go out to find your location? I know some of you inherited, but many people who will be watching this may be looking for their first location, or maybe they're expanding and going to a second, third, or fourth location. But what I want you to do is, everybody, if you are starting from ground zero, what would be most important to you to look for in your business when going and getting ready to find a new location and sign a lease. Go to the chat box and Meadow, if you would read those off, I'm going to be getting our PowerPoint presentation up while you're reading what they're sharing.
Jen says, I look for parking, space
Oh.
size that I need, right? The right square footage for your business and parking. Love that. India says centralized location. So, location, location, location didn't become an expression for no reason. Rain says the curb appeal of target guests, right? That it speaks to those ideal clients that you want to attract, and location. So that's what we've got so far, Lauren.
Yes, well, these are all excellent answers that they're putting. The exposure for some people. Oh, I want a lot of natural lighting. That can save you money on lighting. High traffic location, visually appealing. Great exposure. And so the point I want to get to is, although every one of these is important, here's the $1 million question. How many of you, now I know we have some graduates on here, and I'm certainly hopeful that our graduates who are joining us who have completed cash flow camp will easily and effortlessly know this question. But I know many of you on here or who will be listening to this, I want you to think about this question. How many of you, when you go in to look for a location, know exactly, precisely, everyone say precisely, how much this location must generate in service sales, not including retail, per month, per week, per day, per station, in order for you to make budget and have a profit? How many of you know those numbers to the penny? Go to the chat box and let us know.
I see some typing fingers.
So I know we have some individuals on here who definitely know this, but I also know there's many, many people that don't. And so today we are going to give you the magic answer to that. We're going to hand you on a silver platter what you need to know and what you need to do before you even think about signing a lease. You have got to know what you can afford and not afford, and have the courage to walk away if needed. And I will never forget this one client we had. He was a rock star hairdresser. There were very few people in this industry better than him as a technician. He traveled globally as an international platform artist. He was the greatest hairdresser and still is. But for many of you, being a hairdresser is one thing. Being a business owner is another. How many of you agree? Say yes.
Yes.
So he was a great hairdresser. But I will never forget this as long as I live. When that man sat in cash flow camp, I saw something I had never, ever, ever seen or witnessed from a man. I saw a man sit there and cry hysterically, like I'm talking sobbing. And what we found out is, had he known what he learned that day at cash flow camp, he knew in that moment he would have never, ever, ever signed the lease he did. He would have known that there was absolutely no way he could have ever generated enough money. He could have not put enough stations in there. He could have not had enough, it would have never worked. But he didn't know that. How many of you are smart enough and wise enough to know that there's things as a business owner that you need to know? How many of you know there's things you need to know but don't know? And how many of you know that there are things you don't even know that you don't know? This is one of those areas. This is one of those areas where many people, it's the don't know that they don't know. So we're going to give you clarity. We're going to give you power in that today. So thank you for joining us. And what I wanted to share with this story, because I've seen it happen to too many people, is he couldn't save the business. he ended up losing his business. He lost all of his savings. He lost his 401k. He lost his financial plan. He lost his marriage. And it was not a good situation. And this I have seen, unfortunately, too much. And it should never happen to anyone. So, what I'm about to share with you, you want to put your seatbelt on. You want to get a sharpened pencil, and you don't want to miss this. I am going to take you through something that can save you a massive amount of time, energy, and a lot of money. So, if you're interested in saving time, energy, and a lot of money, this is for you. So what I'm going to be taking you through, it's called the rent justifier multiplier. Now we're going to start with employee-based salons. I will then move to rental salons. And so please know we're going to get through both of those. But what I want each of you to do right now is I need you to write down how much is your rent, either where you currently are, or for some of you, you might even, gosh, I had a girl sit in my class. I remember she was at the Premier Orlando show. She ran up to me after the class, gave me the biggest hug. She goes, I just called my real estate agent. I was going to sign on a lease tomorrow. And because of what you showed me, I realized it would never work and I canceled it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So some of you may be looking at a lease and know how much it's going to be. This is going to set you free. You'll know if you can or cannot afford this, and then make the right and best decision to walk away if needed, knowing the right will come along. And so we're going to start with employee salon, and everybody write down your rent with CAM, which is common area maintenance. Now, what you can see on here is that the goal, everybody say goal. The goal you want to get to is that your rent would be no more than 6.56% to total service sales. This formula does not include retail. Retail is a completely separate business. Never should the two come together. They're separate businesses, separate profit margins, everything's separate. So this does not include retail. So first, you got to know what is your rent plus CAM. Next thing, we want our rent to come in at 6.56%. And our rent justifier multiplier, if you look here, is 15.24. How do we come up with that? It's
Lauren,
simple.
I'm not sure if we can see your screen. Can you share it, please?
Oh my gosh, are you kidding? I am so.
That's
Well,
okay.
thank you for letting me know that. What were you looking at? My
Your
cute
beautiful face.
Well, all right. Well, that can't be a bad thing. At least I thought I looked pretty good today. So, all right, let's get my screen up. My goodness, thank you for letting me know that.
What are friends for, right?
Exactly.
When you say
Okay.
common area maintenance, do you mean like, what do you mean?
So, would you,
Well,
can you answer her
yeah.
while I get my slides up here?
That's right.
Thank
And
you
I can see
so
two
much.
slides right now. So, so a common area maintenance cost is typically in like a larger lease, so it would take care of your, insurance, maintenance costs, and that. So if you were thinking of leasing a station for yourself, that may not be as applicable because you're probably, or if you're looking at renting a suite, correct? Was that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So your rent may very well be a gross rent that's all into. So for the purposes of today, I think Lauren's saying, just make sure it's your whole total gross costs of your
Right.
rent, including CAM cost if you have
Or
them.
mortgage. Mortgage
Or
also.
mortgage. Yeah.
Except
And I can see two slides, Lauren.
you can see two slides. Well, isn't
That's right.
that interesting? All right, so now I've got to fix that. So before, give me just a minute here. All right, I think I got this now. Now, one slide.
One side.
Houston, we have a touchdown. Excellent. All right, so here we go, champions. I want you to think of This 15.24, it's important you understand how did we get this rent justifier multiplier. 100 represents 100% of the service sales that come in. 6.56 represents your goal. So if you take 100% of the service sales that come in each month, divided by 6.56, you will all see it's 15.24. So I want all of you to understand how we came up with that. Now let's give you an example. I want all of you now, you can follow my example, but I actually want you to be using your number if you have it. So in my example, let's say my rent is $3,200 a month. Now, I just spoke to a man last week. His was $570,000 a month. Can you even imagine that? And if we multiply that by 15.24, I can now see that my business must generate $48,768 a month. If you're signing on a new lease, you need to know that's what you got to be bringing in. And so you want to make sure you're equipped, that you have the financial funding to be able to do that. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to break it down. We're going to take the big giant elephant and break it into little bite-sized pieces. So now we're going to take your monthly number. Mine was 48,768. There are 4.3 weeks per month. So you're going to take your monthly service sales, divide it by 4.3. And in my example, I now know, oh, my business must generate 11,341 and 39 cents. I know to the penny what it must bring in, and that gives me power to generate it, to know, are we on track? Are we off track? We're going to keep breaking it down. Let's go down to the daily. My weekly number was 11,341.39. I want you use your numbers. Now, you want to put in how many days is your business open that you're doing this for. Some of you have multiple locations. Do this with each one, but start with the one right today. So let's say mine is open 5 days. Now I know, oh, wow, my business must generate $2,268.27 a day. Clarity is power. Lack of clarity is the number one reason for failure in anything, whether it's personal or business. How many of you now have clarity? Say, I can see it. So we're going to keep bringing it down. And now you can go per station. So now we're going to take our daily number, and my example is 2,268.27. Now we're going to divide it by how many working stations. In my example, it's 6. So now I can go, oh, I need to generate $378.04 per station. How many of you knew this 10 minutes ago with your numbers? This is so powerful. It's so vitally important for you to know, because now you have your targets. Because if you can get your rent in line, it is going to magnify your profit margins, because rent is the second reason a business will close. Compensation is number one. Incorrect compensation is the number one reason your doors will close. But rent is number two. It's usually the second highest expense. So this is so essential, and I'm glad you're here to learn this. All right. If you have a question for employee salons, would you please go to the chat box and type in your question? Meadow, as you get those, would you let me know, and I will make sure to get to those, but I'm going to transition over to a rental salon. So let me know if any questions come in as we transition. So now in a rental salon, the game changes. Now, when I say a rental salon, you are an owner renting spaces. And so notice the goal here is not 6.56% to total service. The goal is 25%. So here's how you're going to look at this one. 100 represents 100% of the rental income you're collecting each month. That's what the 100 represents. The goal is 25. So when we take 100 divided by 25, our rent justifier multiplier is 4. Everybody got that? Say yes. We are in it to win it, champions. So in this example, I'm going to say that the rent for my rental salon is $2,800. I'm going to multiply that by 4. I can see that I must collect 11,200 in rental income per month. Wow, is that powerful? Let's break it down just like we did in our employee salon. Now we're going to take our monthly number, which was 11,200 in rental income I need to collect. There are 4.3 weeks per month, so we're going to divide by that. Now I can see, oh, I must generate $2,604.65 per week in rental income. Clarity is power. Everyone say power. It's power, champions. We're going to keep breaking it down. Now we're going to take our weekly total rental income, which is $2,604.65. Now we want to see, what do I need to collect per station each week? Let's say we have 5. So if you're working this right now for your business, which I hope you are, divided by how many stations you have. In this case, it's 5. Or it could be divided by how many rooms you have. So I now say, oh, I need to collect $520.93 per week. Now, how many of you owners look at that and go, I don't know of too many people that would pay that. How many of you are thinking that? Say I am. Well, the reality is, but now you know. Now you know, and you have to begin to look at the options. So Miss Meadow, I'm going to have you come in here right now, and then I'm going to do your introduction and get you started in a little bit. But I want you to share with them, what is it, Meadow, because you were a coach for us for 3 years. What is it that they need to focus on if they go, this rent is out of line? I mean, we all know one, you either need to renegotiate your lease and get it down, or you need to have more stations. That's the obvious. But what's the unobvious, Meadow?
Yeah, I mean, it's that awareness that as you quantify everything in your business, I remember going through that at cash flow camp myself and realizing that it was not in line with my business, right? But when you're, maximizing the square footage, can I fit in another station? Do I have a whole bunch of square feet that are, for holding magazines? Like, why? Looking at all those areas that we teach in cash flow camp of being able to shift this in order to make those small progressive steps towards change and getting it in line.
Right. So it's going to really take a strategy to begin moving you so you can make a profit. And your goal is to make a profit even on a rental salon. That is your right. That is your destiny. So what, Miss Meadow, did we get any questions that I can address real quick?
No questions so far, Lauren.
Oh my gosh. They are doing great, aren't they?
Yes, absolutely.
So if you do have any questions, just please go to the chat box. Meadow will be watching it. What I want all of you to do right now is something that I think is so important as we're wrapping up the end of a year and literally in 2.5 weeks embarking into a brand new year. New years are new opportunity. But what I want to see is, are you set up to win? Are you at the top of your success mountain? And so, what I want you to do, champions, everybody, real quick, I want you to take your piece of paper and number it from 1 to 11. 1 to 11. This is going to be fast. This is going to be easy. And all you have to do is answer yes or no. So, this is the most important thing you can do right now to see, are you ready to launch into this new year? Are you set up to win as the business owner? Will your team be set up to win? So here we go, champions. We know as the business owner, it always comes down to the essential numbers. You got to track it to smack it. We know what gets measured gets treasured. And so we've got to know the essential numbers. So I want you to ask yourself, have I mastered how to read, understand, and analyze my financial statements to identify the vital changes that must be made to grow and attain the profit I desire? There's no maybes. It's yes or no. Keyword, mastered how to read, understand, and analyze. Number 2, champions. Do you know the precise, to the penny, to the percent, profitability of your service business, excluding retail revenue? 3, do you know the precise profitability of your retail business? 2 different profit margins, 2 different businesses. That one, after all the expenses are deducted, yes or no? Number 4, champions, are you confident your current compensation is structured to ensure you attain your desired profit? As I said earlier, and I'm going to repeat, this is the number one reason your doors will close. If we don't get this one right, you can never be profitable. It will literally be impossible. And everyone thinks, oh, but we just need to sell more. No, if you're paying out more than you can ever bring in, if the percentage going out is higher, it's never going to work. So we want to make sure we got that one right. Do you have confidence about that? Number 5, do you know how to create a customized pay strategy that's tailored to your unique needs and objectives? All of you have different needs and objectives when it comes to that. We all know there's a gazillion ways that we can pay people. It's ridiculous. So one, we got to identify which one is right and best for you. Then we have to organize it, create a strategy to ensure it's going to be profitable. Number 6, gosh, once we have those things in place, we know nothing's going to happen without our dream team. Do you have a written vision statement that describes in vivid detail your ideal team member? You can't just think it, you got to ink it. So if it's in your head, it's a no. It's on paper. It is a couple pages long. It literally depicts everything you want and need to the T, an ideal team member. Number 7, champions. Now that you know who you want on your team, do you know how to craft a wow ad that will kill off the chickens and attract only your ideal, those eagles, the mighty eagles? Do you know how to do that? There's an art to that. Number 8, now that we have our dream team vision statement, now that we know how to craft our ad, now that we know where to go to put this out and to attract them to us, do you have a proven, scripted, and repeatable system on how to find the whole interview process and hiring your dream team candidates so it aligns with your vision statement, yes or no? 9, as you go into this new year, are you armed with a written strategy, complete with an action plan to skyrocket, everyone say skyrocket, your sales and profit? And number 10, champions, we're coming into the finish line here. Do you know the 3 ways you should be compensated as a business owner? And I know some of you are saying 3 ways. I'm barely being paid one way. Well, there are three ways, and it's important you know what those are. But if you do know what they are you being fairly compensated for the time, the energy you put into your business? Number 11, do you have the essential business skills? So, there's everything you've done up till this moment. So, up until this moment, you have learned what you need to know and do for these to be a yes or a no. So, up till now, have you received the essential business skills, knowledge, and proven systems to guarantee a systematized, a profitable, sustainable, thriving business? Yes or no? So, champions, you now have clarity of where you are as the business owner moving in to the new year. It doesn't have to be a new year. It could be a new quarter. It could be a new month, a new year, whatever. You got to be ready. Now I want you to total up all your yeses and nos. So you had a possible 11 yeses. I want you to notice where you are. And what I want you to do is go to the chat box and I want you to share with us, one, if you feel comfortable, how many yeses do you have? How many yeses do you have? I know we have several cash flow camp graduates on here. We have several coaching clients on here. So I'd be curious to see that, but we have a lot of people watching that have never done anything with us. And so I want you to get clarity where you are. But the more important thing is I want you to think, how would all of these be in a yes? How would it impact your life, your personal life? How would it impact your business, financially, emotionally, mentally? How would it equip you as a salon owner? Because in case you didn't notice, there's no cosmetology school that teaches you this. Many people are great technicians that all of a sudden had the opportunity to take over a business or had a dream of starting a business, but didn't know all of this. And so, can you share with me, Meadow, what are people putting in the chat box? Because I really think this is so important to really understand, because there's an impact to the yeses and to the nos.
Yeah, so we have 4 yeses and 7 nos. And some
Thank
of
you for being transparent. Who put that?
Yeah, and 10 yeses and 1 no from our Jackie Scholl graduate, and India has 10 yeses and 1 no.
National Camp and Coaching Client. Good job, India. She is rocking it out and has only been working with us for 3 months. What else are you seeing in there? But
That's
share
everything.
the impact.
Yeah.
Would you have less stress? Would you have more clarity? Would you have more peace of mind? Would you have more certainty? Less chaos? Less confusion? Would you have less doubt? Less fear? Would you feel, we always say control the controllables. And it begins at the end of the day, the moment we signed up to be a business owner, we signed on the dotted line that we must make this a must to learn these things. If you don't, it's going to be a very long and very challenging future for you. So I want to share with you in 1 minute how we can help those of you who want to turn all your no's into yeses. We have our 3-day course called Cash Flow Camp. And at Cash Flow Camp, which we have done for 17 years, we have a promise. And the promise is that we will turn every one of those no's into a yes, or you don't have to pay. And in 17 years, we have never, ever had one person ask for a refund. The only regret I have ever heard is that they didn't learn this and go to this sooner. So we believe it's your time for victory, and we have great news for you. We have won. I want you to imagine stepping into this brand new year with 10 yeses, with a strategy, with action steps, with clarity, with certainty, with that rent justifier is one example of so many blindfolds we are going to remove. So your opportunity is here, champions. It's January 19th, 20th, and 21st in Tampa, Florida. I know many of you are in cold countries, East Coast, the Midwest, and I'm sure you would hate to leave there, but you're going to be leaving there to come join us on the 19th, 21st in Tampa, Florida. And right now, champions, it is $18.99. If you go onto our website, we have our holiday special. You're going to save $500 if you want to bring your significant other. If you have another business owner, you must do this together. They get to come for only $8.99. So you can do a pay in full or two payments of $699.50. And that, my friend, I want you to think about this. For 2 months, that's it. For 2 months, you're investing $31 a day, 25 days a month. You can't go to Harvard University for remotely close to this. It's over 50,000. So this, my friends, is the Harvard University of Education. And for those of you, if it's not possible, so what we want you to do is you can go on to, so if you can put in the chat box, if you can put in there the QR code, if they want to take advantage of the savings. And if you can't make it, we invite you to schedule a complimentary strategy call to help set you up to win for the new year. It will be with myself, or you can ask and request for Meadow because she's going to be going into some great topic here with you. But we are here for you. We want you to have not just a new year. We want you to have your best new year ever. We want you to soar into the new year with the knowledge, with the skills, with the systems, with the tools to set you and your business on fire. So champions, I hope we will get the chance to see you at Cashflow Camp. And now I want to introduce to you our next amazing speaker, Miss Meadow Kenny. And Meadow was a hair designer for a total of 15 years. During that 15 years, she was a very successful and profitable salon owner of Immersia's Salon in Edmonton, Canada. She was an inspiring champions coach for 3 years, and then she decided to make a career change. And she went on to become a licensed cosmetology. That was good. It's embedded in me. She became a licensed commercial real estate associate and one of the best doggone ones in all of Edmonton, Canada. And she was so excited she did that because she was able to take so much of what she learned through Inspiring Champions, incorporate it into this new business, and skyrocket to the top. But interestingly enough, she missed the salon industry. She called me up a year ago in December and said, Lauren, I got to come back. And in January, she officially started full-time with Inspiring Champions as our marketing manager. But I will tell you, she is my right-hand person. She is way more than our marketing manager. She is one of the most brilliant, the most beautiful, the most high integrity human being I have ever met. I would trust her with my life, and you can trust her with yours as well, because she is going to now come from the real estate perspective and things you really need to unfold and think about and look at before you sign on that lease. So step one was to know how much the business must generate. Now we're going to take a turn. So Miss Meadow Kenny, I am going to be turning it over to you. If you want to put your slides up and tell them a little bit about yourself.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Lauren. I don't think there's anything I could say that would beat that wonderful introduction. I will add that I was part of my journey is that I sold my salon for a profit when I made that transition that Lauren was describing. And that ability to build that profitability into my salon is a skill that I am eternally grateful that I learned at the time and carried me through my career since. And so when I work with tenants, so, I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of, small business owners up to big business owners. And there are three things that I always wish they had, the tenant group had knew before they call the real estate agent, certainly before they go look at a space and fall in love with it. And the first one is knowing your budget, which Lauren did a great job doing that. That's step number one. It is so essential that you know what your business can justify in a rent, and so that you can reverse engineer, from there. So for those of you who may not know what your service sales are, if you have a new business, or maybe you're moving to a new place that would open up new opportunities for increased service sales because it's a bigger space or it's in a better area, you're going to want to look at your projection or your forecast of what you think your service sales would be to determine that budget exercise that Lauren took you through just now. So a basic principle that is really important, and the second thing to know, is your market. So real estate, just like the rest of our economic landscape, the principle is supply and demand, right? The more supply that there is of something and the least amount of demand that it has, its perceived value can diminish. Whereas when there's more demand and less supply, the value of that commodity increases. And it's so important that you, as the business owner, know that that's the underpinning of your local real estate market. So certainly for those of you who are looking at renewing leases, possibly renegotiating leases, I heard some great things earlier that a couple of you are a couple years out from that. This really is the time to start thinking and watching your market. And it's so important because it arms you with the information that you need to make confident decisions for what's best for your business. And it also prepares you to negotiate, right? So when you know what is happening in your local market, you are able to know if you're paying a rate, because that market condition is going to affect the market rates. Meaning, on average, a retail space or a personal service space, which is likely the type of uses that folks on this call are looking for. We want to arm you with knowing, hey, the one around the corner rented for this much. This one over there is asking this much, but it has at least in 18 months. So maybe that demand is not high enough to achieve that rate. So how do you do that, right? I think oftentimes tenant groups feel, or salon owners feel, well, how will I know this? And you'll spend a lot of time researching online. But what you would probably find online, if you were to look at websites like LoopNet or other real estate listing posting websites, you may get a whole bunch of listings, but you're only seeing what their asking rate is, meaning what they're advertising. And there's a big difference, wouldn't you agree, between what they're advertising and possibly what it leased for, like the actual amount that was realized by that landlord. So in order for you to know your market, I would highly suggest that you find a local broker. And for those of you who are thinking of renewing, now's the time to do that. For those of you thinking of a new space, now is also the time to do that. But not all brokers or not all real estate associates are created equal, just like in every industry, right? Some of us specialize in color corrections, and some of us specialize in barbering, right? So there's a wide range. You want to find a real estate broker who has experience in your type of lease. So it would likely be someone who does a lot of personal service or retail leasing, as opposed to maybe someone who does like industrial shops with cranes, etc. And how you will know if this person may be the right person for you is that they will know a bunch of information about what the other properties in your target area have leased for. So that's a simple first step. Find 3 local brokers to speak to, ask them if they can share with you leases lease rates from comparable properties that have happened in the last preferably 1 year. I wouldn't go too far back 2 years ago. That may not speak to today's market condition. Sometimes we have to go back historically because if you're looking in a really small, tight area, there just might not be that many of those comparable leases. But if the person you're interviewing is struggling to be able to tell you what a few properties in your area have successfully leased for, and maybe some tidbits about what was involved in that deal. So maybe how many months of free rent they got, or some of those other intricacies. That's a good signal that you're working with a subject matter expert in your area. So don't go it alone. Do your research, but also use this, leverage the professionals in your community to help get you the information that you need. So let me know in the chats, what do you think would shift for you if you really knew what the market rate was in your area? If you really knew what you should be paying for lease from the standpoint of the market, not your budget. Those are 2 different things. So Lauren walked you through what your budget is, and I want you to know that before you pick up the phone and start looking at properties, because what the real estate professionals will tell you is what the market rate is. When you ask them what are the going rates, they're going to tell you the market rate. That might be in line with your budget. It may not be. You need to know those 2 metrics are important and they work in tandem, but they're 2 different pieces of information. So your local subject matter expert should be able to provide you with a comparable market analysis. And I hope that that gave you some insight into how to know if they are truly going to be supportive of you and being able to get you the information that you need. I'm just going to open the chat window because I realize I'm asking you questions, but I can't see the chats. There we go.
Oh, I have the
Got it. Okay.
I'll monitor it for you. No
Right,
questions yet,
right.
but I have
Okay.
a question, Meadow.
Mhm.
What is the ideal best question for them to ask the 3 brokers they're interviewing? What is the one question that will get them closest to the right person quicker?
Can you send me a comparable market analysis with the actual lease rate?
Are you also asking them, what is your area of expertise?
Right, absolutely. And you're going to be able to know if they can answer that question.
Do you ask them, how many of these type of businesses have you helped? Have you done leases for?
Yeah,
Like,
you could ask all of those things, but you will know based on what their comparable market analysis says.
oh, great. So that's kind of going to tell you everything. Good.
Yeah, that's going to give you a lot of insight. And
Nice.
if you ask for a few of them, you're going to start to gather that information that you could then use in a lease renewal application, or negotiation, saying, hey, so let's dive into that a little bit more.
All right, perfect.
Okay, so what you need to, once you receive this comparable market analysis, or if you are finding some on your own, the second principle that I want you to walk away with, other than that real estate is based on supply and demand, is this principle of a comparable market analysis. You want to be comparing an apple to an apple, not an apple to a banana. right?
Mm.
Because not all spaces are the same. And so what you are looking for in this comparable market analysis are the salient details that was this rate that was advertised, that is likely the base rate, right? Because your CAM costs are typically an estimate. There's something that you're billed for at regular intervals, monthly, quarterly, or annually from your landlord. And so when you're receiving and reviewing these comparable market analysis, if you have further questions, ask them. So dig a little bit deeper to ensure that, hey, this one looks like it's very similar to this one, but there's a $4 per square foot difference. What's included in the base rent and what is not? Getting really clear on what your gross total costs will be. Because it's marketing. A landlord's going to market their listing to be as enticing as possible. So they may, will typically look at marketing their base rate, and then they'll likely be posting the CAM cost estimate as well. So if you see something that's really out of whack, just make sure that you are looking at an apple to an apple. So in reverse, if the base rate looks very, very low, get really clear on what is included in that rate. Is pest control included? Is security included? Is it not, right? So you'll all be looking at different types of leases. There are many different. But when you're comparing them, just do your very best to exclude things that are an anomaly. So if it's not an apple to an apple or relatively close to that, you're going to want to ask a few more questions to determine, is this really comparable to the place that I'm looking at, or is it wildly different? Any questions about that? No, so far. Okay. So when we're looking at these comparable pieces, the amenities, and a lot of you struck on them at the beginning. I loved Lauren's question. You guys were talking a lot about over and above the price per square foot, you're going to be looking at the amenities. So the amenities are what make it an apple to an apple or an apple to a banana, right? So your parking, exposure, are you on the main level or are you on a second floor, right? Typically, most retail has the best exposure at a grade level entry, right? There are definitely some really cute second floor boutiques. If it's on the second floor or third floor, does it have an elevator, right? Are there common area washrooms? And security is a huge piece for tenants, right? What does the landlord include in that CAM cost to be able to speak to security? Is there a security fob? Is there cameras? Is there patrolled security, right? So if you're looking at something that has two very similar rates, but one of them has a lot more security involved in that cost, that's where you will price adjust that comparable to say, okay, this particular amenity, especially your parking and signage, which will be a huge amenities for you as a business owner. You can ask your trusted real estate associate, how much of a differential should I be paid, right? So if I'm in a corner space on the corner of Busy Street and Busier Street with a huge sign and a 30 parking lot beside me that I can use, how much should that increase my rate versus if I was to be, facing a back alley with no parking and no signage capabilities, right? That is an apple and an orange comparison. And your trusted broker should be able to give you a bit of a guideline of, typically something with high exposure in this area should be approximately $30 a square foot. We noticed that something that's on the second floor or has back alley exposure looks more like 25. So then you know that that's about a $5 per square foot differential. right? So you don't have to be a master of this. I just want you to know what questions to ask so that you can gather the information that you've and make really informed, confident decisions for your business in 2025. So I would say signage and parking and exposure, of course, are your biggest pieces that you want to determine and play with in that budget that Lauren gave you. Do I think I could increase my sales by X amount if I was on the corner of busy and busier street? And if so, does X amount that I think that would bring into our business justify the higher rent? Run those numbers and then run a second analysis of, if I take this more cost-effective space and I invest some of those savings into online marketing or other ways to get people in the door, and then run my rent justifier formula that Lauren gave you, you can then compare those two options and make the best decision for your business. So amenities are really important. The third thing, so this first thing for you to know was your budget. The second thing for you to know was your market. And the third thing that's really overlooked is knowing your landlord. So landlords are people too. So sometimes they are organizations. Sometimes they are a couple who just bought their first building and are hoping to send one of their kids to university off the money it makes them. Some people are accidental landlords that either inherited a building or operated a business out of it themselves and then purchased the building and then retired from the business. So there's a big gamut in who your landlord might be, and it really speaks to how you're going to negotiate with them. When you are narrowing down what you think is an apple to an apple of what you're either comparing your current lease against or what you're thinking of leasing in the future. When you narrow those, 3 to 5 subject properties down, I want you to ask the professional you're working with information about the landlord well before you craft an offer. And if you have a landlord already, start gathering information about them. Maybe you know some of these things, but maybe you do not. So
And Meadow, what specifically might be what they would ask about the landlord?
Yeah, so we're going to go through that here right now.
Okay,
so you're going to ask, what type of landlord is this? Is this a family-owned real estate holdings that maybe has 10 properties? Are they a professional landlord, meaning like this, they're in the business of being a landlord? They're not an institutional company, but they are perhaps it's their full-time job. They acquire and manage properties for a living. I would call that a professional landlord. Or are they an institutional landlord, meaning are they a big organization or a publicly traded company or even a private company, but they have shareholders and it is a big organization that's typically using a property manager to manage the property. So
is there a particular answer they might get that would be a red light saying run?
No, they're just all different.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there one that's better than the other?
No, they're just all different. So you need to know, because if you're going to embark on a negotiation with anyone for anything, the more, right? When your clients come in, we do a consultation with them so that we can match their expectations to the desired result and that it creates a happy transaction, right? And ultimately, it's a relationship. And this relationship that you're going to have with the landlord could be a decade long or more. So the more you know about them, the more it will arm you in your negotiations. So, but their needs might be different, Lauren. And I think that that's what you're getting at. The needs of a family-owned private landlord and an institutional landlord can be very different. For example, a big institutional landlord, they are probably using the prospectus of that property to either buy other property, negotiate more funding or lending or anything like that. So the valuation of their business is based on the value of the rents that they get, the leases. The leases that they have in place are what are establishing the value of their organization. So that landlord would likely want to see a lot of a higher rate. Their face rate, like that base rate amount, is going to be really important to them. They want to bump that up probably as high as they can, but they have a bigger war chest to give you tenant improvement allowance or to give you more free rent in your deal or to negotiate those kind of perks in. Because if they can keep their rate really high, that's healthy for their business. They have a big war chest that you might be able to say, okay, this is over my budget, my rent justifying budget. But if I was to ask for 6 months of free rent scattered throughout the 10 years of my lease, that might bring my net effective rent down for it to be closer to be in line. And that landlord who's institutional may have a lot bigger appetite for that, as opposed to maybe an accidental landlord or a, family owned small landlord who likely is just, wants to make sure they can keep up with the maintenance of their building, and they may have a smaller war chest. So they're going to be less likely to want to give you a tenant improvement allowance or anything that costs them money out of their account. But they may be open to negotiating a lower lease rate in reflection of that. So that ability to know what your landlord wants. So that's your question to your trusted broker. What type of landlord is this? Is a great question. How many properties do they have? Is another great question. And here's the really important one that I've circled on the screen. What are they looking for in their lease? I think people spend a lot of time agonizing over their offer amount because they are guessing what the landlord's going to want. When in reality, if they were to just ask, what is this landlord looking for? They would hear they want a 10-year lease, they're willing to throw in extra parking, and they were hoping to keep the tenant improvement to $20 a square foot. And you might have been willing to take like way more than that and less tenant improvements. So asking those questions, finding out, are they going to be easy to work with? And how will they manage it? Will they be managing it themselves, meaning you're working with them back and forth? Or will they be using a property manager? And if your landlord is going to be using a property manager, your next question is, who is the, and getting, asking for information as to who's managing that property and what their contract is like. So Rain has a great question. What would be your suggestions to get your landlord to negotiate lease renewal in a timely manner? Last time the management company our landlord used put off renewing lease until 1 month before renewal. It's a family-owned landlord. Great question. So when, if you had asked me that question, I would say write out a letter of intent, which is not, necessarily a binding offer, but put together the terms of what you want that to look like, what you're willing to do in your renewal, and make it time sensitive. So at the bottom of your letter of intent, you could say, I'm open to these terms basically until this time next week. You can always extend that date, but anytime you're giving the landlord anything as way of a letter of intent or an offer, there should be an acceptance by date, meaning that, hey, I'm willing to look at a deal that looks like this, providing you get back to me and we agree by X time. And would using a broker increase your cost? Now, a lot of the time, a broker is paid by the landlord, but you want to ask a broker that up front just to make sure. And even if you don't necessarily use a broker to help you with that deal, that doesn't mean that that landlord doesn't have an obligation to pay a real estate agent fees. So definitely ask. It might increase your costs, but it's typically not going to. So any other questions? That was a lot. I see a lot of like heads doing this.
There's a lot of writing going on. I actually can see smoke coming off of some of the people's pencils.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is fantastic. We have never done a webinar about this in the past. And what great information for these amazing champions to have. Because it's not a matter of if, it's simply a matter of when each of you are going to have to get a new lease or renew a lease. And to have this kind of knowledge, and what a blessing, Meadow, to have someone with your expertise, on our team to be able to be so supportive.
Well, I appreciate it. Well, India says, do you recommend hiring an attorney in addition of a broker? That is a wonderful question.
Yes.
So on the slide that I just had up there, I had personal guarantees, right? That's the other thing you want to know about your landlord. And so I would say, yes, India, your offer to lease should be contingent or subject to attorney approval, right? So when you write your offer to lease or a letter of intent, you'll want to have, whether you do it yourself or a broker does it, put a condition or a subject to that the terms and the actual formal lease itself, the lease that you get back from the landlord, be reviewed by your attorney. And this is something to note of what kind of landlord you're working with. Add to your list of questions to ask. Will they require a personal guarantee or an indemnity? Because that you definitely want your attorney to review. A personal guarantee can sometimes have you on the hook for the whole lease amount all the way to the end, right? So if I'm working with a tenant, and there needs to be a personal guarantee, the landlord's asking for that, I would maybe suggest you increase your deposit to help them either reduce the personal guarantee amount, because then you have a finite amount of money that's at risk, not an indefinite amount of money. And if your personal guarantee could diminish over the course of the term. So if your personal guarantee is, let's just use for easy numbers, $100,000 or whatever the value of that lease was, which is probably a lot more than $100,000. Let's use $500,000. And that amount of money, in my opinion, and when I'm working for a tenant, I strive to make sure that it decreases as the term goes by. So that if it's a 5-year term, and at the beginning of year 1, you're kind of on the hook for $500,000, that you shouldn't be on the hook for that same $500,000 in year 4, right? Like the landlords receive that money. I like to write them that they diminish as the time goes by, because the landlord's risk is decreased as well, right? So thinking about what the landlord wants and that the landlord also has risk, they take their risk of you being a viable business. And so my last kind of ninja tip to sprinkle on top is get your financial package ready together. The more that you can present to that landlord what makes you a great tenant, whether it be financial statements, a business plan, you want to gather that before you start shopping, so that if you see the right place, it's in your crosshairs and you're in a competitive market. And it just looks professional and serious, and like you've got some skin in the game and you're ready to, will have you stand out head and shoulders, versus say like a startup business that may not have any financials yet to show.
My gosh, Meadow, these are some excellent tips. I know that you're sprinkling. I love the verbiage. But the one I really love was the question we had from India about the personal guarantee. And I think that most people, if they didn't know what you just shared, how it should diminish and go down each year because you've paid more into it, my hunch is, and it's just a hunch, is that often would that not be put in the contract unless you brought it up.
Right. And so to India's point, you definitely want your attorney to review your lease and any personal guarantees. And you can sometimes negotiate no personal guarantee if you were to give a bigger deposit. So that's something to to keep in your little negotiation toolkit as well.
Wonderful. I'm looking to see if there were any other questions as we wrap up here, champions. I can't believe our time together went this quickly. Wow. What amazing individuals and owners we had joining us today. Any other
Yes.
questions?
I'm just typing my email in here as well. Go ahead. You're
I
on
see.
mute.
I have a question. So I know this was about what you should do before you sign your lease. And I just signed mine about maybe 2 weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, to move to a totally new building in a suite with
Yeah.
new owners. These owners they have their own skin in the game. I feel like I do too. But they have businesses, what is it, like beauty salons around like salon and spa around our city. So they are family owned. But they've been in business over 30 years, and they have now opened, this will be their third salon suite building that they're opening. She talked to me and said, well, we've learned things along the way and we're making it better each time.
I bet they have.
Yeah. But it's so hard to get, like, I guess like the square footage is, I think it's 130 square feet or something like that. But it's always hard to get from the suite landlords the like 9 by 10, or is this a 12 by 13? How do we find that out? And then how can I adjust a lease if it's already been signed, but the time when I was promised that the space would be open, it's not going to be open. It's going to be 2.5 weeks later.
Those are great
Right.
questions. And Meadow, I have to guess that it's not just in salon suites, but many salons, as they go in, are they getting the exact dimensions? Because that is very important to know. So I'm going to let you answer those excellent questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we're kind of at our time, but we're happy to stay on to answer further questions. So, there are many ways to calculate the square footage. So there's a leasable area and a usable area. In your particular case, you're renting a suite, right? And so I think established already, it's a gross rent. It's not based on the square footage in your particular case, I would guess, right? It's a flat amount each month. So
yeah, but I mean, they do charge people more for the bigger suites, so I feel like it's
right,
per square footage.
exactly. So, but again, that's comparing that apple to an apple. I would guess it's a gross flat rate, and typically suite rentals are, because there's a lot of amenities in that little suite that you're also renting, right? Your use of the station, some of things you're bringing of your own. And so it's a little bit different. So if you are looking at a lease space that is based on square footage, the listing should say if it is, what the leasable area is and what the rentable area is. And there are a lot of variables there, right? Because if you've got a place that has, and why it isn't straightforward is a basic explanation. If you are in a building that has common washrooms, which I'm sure yours does, right? There's not a washroom in your suite, but you and your clients can use a washroom in the building, right? So that pickup cost of that has to be worked in for the landlord. So that's why that leasable and rentable area isn't always as straightforward as just measuring the inside of your space. And so you're going to lean on your broker. You can, in an offer to lease, to protect yourself, I would ask the landlord to provide you as one of your conditions the certificate of measurement. So like BOMA is a big group that does a lot of that. So in your offer to lease, you could have a condition to verify the size and make sure it's in your lease. Usually it should be rated on there. So ask for a certificate of the measurement.
Okay.
And then what was the second question? I'm sorry, I got sidetracked.
Wondering if anything can be changed
Right.
or modified in the lease since I've signed it, since it's going to be like 2.5 weeks later than what I was stated, because I put in my notice to leave my space December 30th. And so
Yeah.
it's like I have 2.5 weeks of what do I do?
Right. And I think this is one variable that came up for you that could have, like, many other people on the call may have a similar question. How do I work with something that's already in place? So a contract is an agreement between both parties. So depending on what the wording is in the contract of, like, if the space isn't provided on time, what does the wording speak to about what then would the landlord need to do? So there might be a contingency built in there that, like, they have 2 weeks of flex room. If it goes beyond that, they, need to compensate you, or you can, I would just ask them if I would say, hey, so what does that mean for me? When does that mean that my first month's rent or first couple months rent will be forgiven? I would probably just have a conversation about that. Now, same goes with if you're in a lease and both parties have kept up with their obligations of the lease, it is binding. So what your lease agreement, like the final lease agreement that you signed with the landlord, says is that's basically what goes, right? So if you feel like the landlord hasn't held up their end of the bargain, you can definitely have a conversation with them. And I would suggest you start it out as a very friendly, how can we make this work together conversation from the get-go, but propose what would work for you. Maybe it's not another month of free rent right now, but you would like free rent in January of 2026 to offset that period of time that isn't the busiest for us, right? So it's about communication, really, right? And understanding, what does the landlord need? What do I need? How can I close the gap?
Okay.
Excellent feedback. And it really
Okay.
applies whether you're going into a suite or whether you're going into a lease or a mortgage, the same thing. It applies to everyone. Those were great questions.
Yeah. Salvatore asked about the lease, to ask about the electricity, water pressure storage area for supplies. Those are great examples, Salvatore, that, is electricity and water in the CAM cost or not? And is what in the CAM cost, is that for the common areas only, or is that for in my suite?
Yeah,
Go
you
ahead,
got to get
Salvatore.
that in writing, because also if the air conditioning goes, who's responsible for that? If the water pressure, the hot water heater boiler is not for the amount of seats that you have to have plenty of water, and ask the landlord too about the pressure if it's strong enough, because a salon requires a different type of water pressure. And then I wrote down here, yeah, just like if something should go with electricity, like the lighting, I just had to replace all my lighting system. And when I asked the landlord to help me with that, he said it's not in the lease. And so I had to get LED lighting. It was about $5,000.
Oh,
That came out of my pocket. So these are just things that I wanted to share.
are these things that they should be negotiating going into a new lease or signing or renewing a lease?
You could, because what I did, I discussed storage in the basement for supplies. The owner said that he doesn't grant you storage, nobody downstairs. But I told him that I'm a small business, and I need to buy a lot of supplies to for my profit of supplies, and I can get a better cost by buy more. And I also used another, he said, okay, and he didn't charge me. And he gave me another room too, to put a washing machine and a dryer in it, so that I can now have the laundry. We can do the laundry downstairs. And that saves a lot of cost when you have people coming in, taking, towels and capes and gowns. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was very smart of you to do. Good job, Salvatore.
Yeah.
All
nice
right.
work. Yeah. And that's that perfect example. That's like, you know what? how can we make this work with the landlord? And I would say definitely on a renewal, you have this track history. They love that you're there, you're stable, you paid the rent. You know what I mean? There's a lot less risk for a landlord renewing an existing tenant after 5 years than finding a new one. So they may be open to, some little things like that that you don't see on the listing, but make a huge difference to your business, right?
Can I
This
add
is,
can I add one more thing too? I just
Yes.
thought of, it's funny. The right of refusal. So supposing that landlord wants to sell that building, right?
Mhm.
You have it in your lease that I have the first right of refusal, so I can buy this building.
wow.
Yeah.
That's what I
And
found so beneficial about this is really it's all about the negotiation. So when you go into a negotiation, I think if I've learned anything here, you must go into it prepared. You need
yeah,
to be crystal clear to talk with the right people and to go in and know the questions to ask. As we always say at Inspiring Champions, it's already a no if you don't ask. And so
right.
sometimes, so many people go into these leases and it's the I don't know that I don't know. Instead
Right.
of educating themselves ahead of time and going in, because if they're talking to a person who's educated, they're going to negotiate very differently than they will with someone who they are clear knows nothing.
Yeah, it is. It's a totally different story when you have those confident pieces of information to make your best decisions on, because you may go to a lease space where there's someone there who's in the sales, like in that role, and they may be an employee of that institutional landlord, right? The property manager or the leasing rep, right? And so their job is to make these deals make sense for the landlord. And it's not that they're trying to make them not make sense for the tenant, but you need to know what's important for you and the health of your business before you, so that you can compare against what you're being told and what you know to be true.
Do you also need to go into this knowing your deal breakers?
Yeah, yes. I mean, so personal guarantee, I think, is a big deal breaker. The exclusive use terms and restrictive covenants. So, an exclusive use would be, is there something in your lease that says I will be the only, if it's, say, a strip mall or something that has multiple, one landlord has a whole bunch of property in close proximity or on the same piece of land. Are you going to be the only only business offering the services that you offer, right? Or are there going to be other businesses? And if, and that's pretty tricky, right? Because you may be offering hair services when you first start out. So I would say if you have any thoughts about offering other services in the future, even if you're not offering them today, you may want them written into that exclusive use that you may in time offer waxing, facials, head spa, like, right? So that you can have that capacity to grow into those services and it be protected into your exclusive use term, right? Some businesses are like, no, I don't care. I'm, you'll see two similar businesses side by each. Clearly there's no exclusive use term in those leases. So that could be a deal breaker for some folks, but really knowing your budget and not like not relying on any real estate broker to tell you what you should be able to afford. You need to know what you can afford based on your business's sales and the personal guarantee, because that's where your big risk is in your lease over and above, how stressful it would be to, close your business. It would be even more stressful to still be on the hook for the lease. Yeah.
Well, and you know what? That's exactly why that individual I talked about earlier, why it was a domino effect to losing everything. One, their debt was so intense, there was no coming out of it. And to get out of the lease, he couldn't sell it because it wasn't ever going to generate a profit because of the size and not being able to put enough stations. And that skyrocketed into him having to use his retirement fund, his savings account to pay off the lease, to losing their home, it's a domino effect. So it's so important that we go into these things educated and that we know what our deal breakers are. We know what we must have. We've got to know what is the budget and have the wisdom. You know, we had an individual who shared, my gosh, they go, we found this location. And most people, it's all about the location. It's got to be on the busiest street and window front and all these cars driving by that. Well, the price is going to go up. And they said they looked at it and everything inside of them screamed, I've got to have this. I got to have this. I got to figure it out. But because they knew the rent justifier, they had the wisdom to know this will never work. I have to walk. And they walked. But here's what's interesting. 2 weeks later, they actually found something better. And they had to drive past the place they really wanted every day. And it came in at the price they could afford. So we got to have wisdom. We've got to be educated. We've got to know our deal breakers. We've got to know our must haves and go in and know you really can have it all as long as you know what that is. And Meadow.
Yeah.
I just want to thank you for the amazing job you did today. Can we all give Miss Meadow a really big hand?
I know it's really boring, but I'm glad.
This is how we give a hand on Zoom trainings. And so I hope all of you, my homework assignment to each of you is you must move it to a top priority to go in, go back through the rent justifier we showed you and get really massive clarity. What's the monthly? What's the weekly? What's the daily? And what's the per station if that applies to you? And so we truly hope that all of you have gained tremendous insights, knowledge into supporting you. We look forward to soaring into the new year together with you. And we thank you from the bottom of our heart for being such amazing clients. I just wrap my arms around and give each of you a really big hug. And I just hope you have the most blessed holiday season. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah. Whatever you celebrate, may it be your best ever. We love you, we appreciate you, and we are cheering you on to your grandest, to your biggest, most bodacious goals and dreams in this new year. And we will be cheering you on every step of the way. So thank you, champions. Mwah.